A signature. That's all it was. A few strokes of a $10,000 pen, and Garrett Holloway would secure his company's future with a $100 million deal. The room, the Apex's most exclusive private suite, buzzed with the silent energy of a done deal. The only person who didn't belong was Aria, the new waitress, trembling as she held a water pitcher. But Aria saw something everyone else missed. A ghost on a screen, a name on a file. And in that second, she knew. This wasn't a merger. It was an execution. She had one choice: stay silent and keep her job, or speak up and stop a catastrophe. The Apex restaurant wasn't just a place to eat. It was a fortress of power. Perched 60 floors above the city, its floor-to-ceiling windows looked down on the world like a judgmental eye. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old money and new ambition. And into this fortress walked Aria Petrova, feeling like an ill-dressed ghost. Aria was, by any measure, a ghost of her former self. 6 months ago, she was Aria Petrova, senior forensic accountant at a top-tier risk advisory firm. She hunted for ghosts, shell corporations, hidden assets, fraudulent wire transfers. She could trace a single dollar through the labyrinthine banking systems of Cyprus, Panama, and Delaware. She was the best. Then her brother, Leo, had been diagnosed. A rare, aggressive neurological disorder. The insurance called his treatment experimental. The family home was sold. Her 401k was liquidated. Her savings evaporated. When Leo died, Aria was left with a mountain of medical debt so vast it had its own gravitational pull. Her high-stress, 80-hour-a-week job was impossible to maintain during the crisis, and a 6-month gap in the high-stakes finance world was a death knell. Her security clearance lapsed. Her professional network moved on. Now she was just Aria, the new waitress at the Apex, wearing a uniform that chafed and shoes that were 2 sizes too small, hired on a probation-only basis by the terrifyingly precise manager, Mr. Benoit. "Petrova," Benoit had hissed during the morning briefing, his voice like tearing silk. "You are on probation. You are invisible. You are silent. Tonight we host Mr. Garrett Holloway in the Sky Suite. He is important. You will refill water and bread. You will not make eye contact. You will not speak. You are a function, not a person. Do you understand?" "Yes, Mr. Benoit," Aria had murmured. Garrett Holloway. Even Aria knew the name. CEO of Holloway Dynamics, a bleeding-edge logistics and technology firm. Holloway was a shark, a titan of industry who had built an empire from scratch. Tonight, according to the whispers in the kitchen, he was closing the deal of a lifetime. A $100 million merger with a European conglomerate, Eurostream Holdings. Aria's station was the Sky Suite. She entered, her hand steady despite the tremor in her stomach. The room was dominated by the table. At its head sat Garrett Holloway. He was in his late 50s, with a face that looked carved from granite and eyes that missed nothing. He was flanked by his legal team. Opposite him sat the Eurostream contingent, a man named Lars Voigt, impossibly slick, with a silver-black mane of hair and a smile that never touched his eyes. Beside him, a woman, Katrina Beck. She was skeletal, silent, and dressed in severe, expensive black. She hadn't said a word, simply watched. "The capital injection will be immediate, Garrett," Voigt was saying, his voice a smooth baritone. "As soon as the ink is dry, our bank in Zurich will begin the transfer. Full liquidity within 12 hours. "Your terms are aggressive, Lars," Holloway countered, steepling his fingers. His voice was gravel. "Bypassing the standard 30-day escrow is a significant risk." "It is a significant show of faith," Voigt replied, smiling. We believe in this synergy. Why wait? Let us begin the new era tonight. Arya moved like a shadow. She refilled Holloway's water. He didn't look up. She moved to Voight's side. He paused, annoyed by the interruption, and flashed his wrist as he gestured. Arya froze for a fraction of a second. The watch. It was a Patek Philippe Sky Moon tourbillon, a $3 million watch. Arya knew it because she'd once traced one as a seized asset. But this one was wrong. The engraving on the visible rotor was too shallow. The blue of the night sky dial was a shade too bright. It was a super clone, a near-perfect counterfeit. A $10,000 fake designed to fool everyone except an expert, or a forensic accountant who'd spent a month staring at a real one. Why, Arya thought, her blood suddenly cold, would a man brokering a $100 million deal be wearing a fake watch? She backed away, her mind racing. A simple vain man might wear a fake, but a man at this level? It wasn't vanity. It was a costume. And as she reached the door, she glanced at Ms. Beck. The silent woman was looking down at her phone, held low in her lap. Arya's trained eye caught the interface of the app she was using. It wasn't iMessage. It wasn't Signal. It was a black and gold icon Arya knew from the darkest corners of her old job. The app was called Aegis Chat. It was an invitation-only, military-grade encrypted messenger, famous in financial crime circles for its self-destruct and no-trace data protocols. It was what you used when you couldn't risk any authority ever seeing what you wrote. It was the digital equivalent of meeting in a soundproof bunker 5 miles underground. Arya stood outside the door, her heart hammering against her ribs. A fake watch and a criminal's messenger app. Something was terribly, terribly wrong. For the next hour, Arya performed her duties on autopilot. She was a machine, in with bread, out with plates, in with water, out with empty glasses. But her mind was on fire. Every fibre of her old professional self, dormant for so long, was screaming. Flags, these are flags. She watched them. Holloway was a predator, but a weary one. He was negotiating from a place of need. Arya had read the financial news. Holloway Dynamics was over-leveraged. They had a brilliant product, but a critical cash flow crisis. This $100 million deal wasn't just a merger, it was a lifeline. He needed this to work. Voight and Beck knew it. They were patient, smooth. They were sharks, too, but they were the kind that wait for the blood to be in the water. Garrett, the final prospectus is, as we discussed, Voight said, sliding a thick, leather-bound document across the table. All the risk assessments from our side are clean. We're ready to sign. Holloway's lawyer, a younger man named Pearson, leaned in. Sir, I must again advise that the indemnity clause is unusual. It absolves Eurostream of nearly all post-merger liability. A formality. Voight waved his hand dismissively. Given the speed of our capital injection, our board insists on it. We are, after all, taking the initial risk. Once our funds are integrated, it's irrelevant. Holloway grunted, his eyes scanning the page. He was being cornered, and he knew it. But the $100 million was too tempting. It was the cure for all his problems. Mr. Benoit appeared at Arya's shoulder. More coffee for the table, Petrova. Now, and be quick. Arya nodded, grabbing a silver pot of fresh French press. This was her chance. She needed another look. She re-entered the room just as Lars Voight stood, ostensibly to stretch his legs. Excuse me, gentlemen. A brief call to Zurich to confirm the wire pathway. He stepped away from the table, toward the window, turning his back. As he did, he unbuttoned his suit jacket, and a small, monogrammed notebook slipped from his inner pocket and fell silently onto the thick carpet. Voight didn't notice. He was already speaking in low, urgent German into his phone. Arya's eyes darted to the notebook. It had fallen open. She moved to that side of the table, pouring coffee for Katrina Beck, who watched her with dead, assessing eyes. Aria's hand, the one not holding the pot, was shaking. As she leaned in, her gaze dropped to the notebook. It was open to a page of handwritten notes. Not German. English. A list of account numbers and routing codes. And at the top of the page, a name. It wasn't Eurostream Holdings. The name, meticulously written in expensive-looking ink, was Apex Global Ventures. Aria's breath hitched. The coffee pot tilted dangerously. "Waitress," Holloway snapped. "My cup." "My apologies, sir," Aria whispered, straightening. But her mind was no longer in the room. It was 2 years in the past, in a sterile conference room, looking at a projector screen. The Dubai 500 mastered commodities fraud. A network of criminals had created an entirely fictitious commodities brokerage. They'd lured in dozens of mid-level investment firms, promising staggering returns on rare earth metals. They'd built trust, processed a few small, profitable trades, and then, on one catastrophic day, they'd called for massive capital investment. The money flooded in and vanished. The entire operation, the fake websites, the falsified shipping manifests, the complex network of offshore accounts, had been run through a single central shell corporation, a company registered in the Marshall Islands, a company called Apex Global Ventures. The principals were never found. The money was never recovered. It was one of the most audacious, brilliant, and ruthless financial crimes of the decade. And the man claiming to be from Eurostream Holdings had the ghost's name in his private notebook. This wasn't a merger. It was a repeat. They weren't investing in Holloway Dynamics. They were liquidating it. They were going to get Holloway to sign, authorizing the transfer of his company's assets and intellectual property into a new, joint entity. But the entity wasn't Eurostream. It was a shell. The moment he signed, they would have control. The 100 millimeters injection wasn't coming in. It was a phantom, a lure. The real money, Holloway's money, his company, his entire life's work, was about to go out, straight to the same digital black hole that had swallowed the Dubai investments. Voigt finished his call and turned around. He saw his notebook on the floor. He saw Aria standing near it. Their eyes met. Voigt's smile was still on his face, but it was no longer a smile. It was a baring of teeth. He knew she'd seen it. He picked up the notebook, tucked it away, and sat down. "Well, gentlemen," Voigt said, his eyes still locked on Aria. "The path is clear. Shall we sign?" Aria was backing out of the room. Her legs felt like water. Voigt's eyes followed her all the way to the door. He wasn't just a con man. He was dangerous. And he knew she knew. Aria stumbled into the service corridor, leaning against the wall. The air in her lungs refused to move. He knows. He knows I saw it. She wasn't just a waitress who'd seen something suspicious. She was now a witness, a loose end. Her first instinct was to run. Clock out, disappear into the night, and forget everything. She was broke, in debt, and powerless. What could she do? But then she saw Holloway's face in her mind, the weary, cornered look of a man betting his entire legacy on one last hand. She thought of the Dubai victims, the families, the small-time investors, the employees who had lost everything. The system had failed them. She took a shaky breath. She was part of the system now, even if it was just as a waitress. She straightened her uniform and marched down the hall to Mr. Benoit's office. He was at his desk, reviewing receipts, his face a mask of pinched concentration. "Mr. Benoit," Aria said, her voice louder than she intended. He looked up, infuriated. "What, Petrova? What could possibly be so important that you interrupt me during the Holloway dinner?" "Sir," The deal. In the Sky Suite. It's a fraud. Benoit's pen stopped moving. He slowly raised his head, his eyes narrowing to slits. What did you just say? The men with Mr. Holloway. They aren't who they say they are. They're criminals. You saw nothing, Benoit snapped, his voice a low, vicious whip. You are a waitress. You are, to be precise, a probationary waitress who I was convinced to hire as a favor to a temp agency. You are not an analyst. You are not a cop. You are a tray carrier. But I know what I saw. The name in his notebook, Apex Global Ventures. It's a shell corporation. They're con artists. They're going to steal his company. We have to call the police. We have to stop him from signing. Benoit stood up, his small frame rigid with fury. You, he said, are insane. You are having a delusion. And you are about to cost this restaurant its most important client. He stepped close to her, jabbing a finger at her chest. Mr. Holloway is a titan. He has a dozen lawyers. Do you think he doesn't know who he's in business with? Do you think you, with your community college education and your minimum wage job, have uncovered something his entire legal team missed? That's not. Here is what will happen, Benoit interrupted, his voice dripping with venom. You will go back to the kitchen. You will polish silverware until your shift ends. You will not go near the Sky Suite again. You will not speak to anyone. And tomorrow, you will not come back. You are fired. Mr. Benoit, please, you don't understand what's at stake. I understand perfectly, he hissed. My reputation is at stake. The restaurant's reputation is at stake, and I will not have it ruined by some hysterical, paranoid girl. Now get out of my office. If I see you anywhere near that suite, I will have security throw you out of the building, physically. Arya stared at him. The finality in his voice was absolute. He wasn't just disbelieving. He was actively hostile. He was protecting his world, his bubble, his precious apex. The truth didn't matter. The appearance mattered. She backed out of the office, her entire body shaking. Fired. She was fired. She had nothing. She walked past the kitchen, past the busboys laughing, and into the service corridor that led to the Sky Suite. The door was 100 feet away. Through it, a man was about to have his life destroyed. She looked at the fire alarm on the wall. She could pull it, cause a general evacuation. But Voight and Beck would just slip away in the chaos. The deal would be postponed, not stopped. And they would know exactly who did it. They'd come for her. She looked at the house phone. Call 911. Hello, police. A man is signing a bad business deal. They would laugh and hang up. No, there was no one else. Benoit was a wall. The police were too slow. Holloway's own team was blinded by the promise of 100 million. It was just her. A ghost. She looked down at her hands. They were raw from the cheap detergent in the kitchen. She thought of her brother, Leo. In his final days, he'd told her, Annie, don't ever let them make you feel small. You were born to fight. She wasn't a ghost. She was a watchdog, and the wolves were in the house. She turned and walked, not to the kitchen, but to the service cart. She picked up a heavy glass pitcher, filled it with ice water, and began the long walk back to the Sky Suite. The walk from the service station to the Sky Suite door was the longest of Oria's life. Each step was a cannon shot in the silent, carpeted hall. Her mind was no longer panicking. It was cold. It was calculating. Her old self, the forensic accountant, was back in control. What is the timeline? The signing of the document was Phase 1. It was the legal mechanism. It gave Voight and Beck's shell company control of Holloway's assets. Phase 2 would be the transfer. Holloway thought he was opening the door for 100 meters to come in. In reality, he was signing to authorize his assets to be moved out. Voigt had said a brief call to Zurich to confirm the wire pathway. He wasn't confirming it. He was arming it. The second that signature was on the page, Miss Beck, the silent one on her Aegis Chat app, would send a single encrypted message. Go. Somewhere, a technician working for their syndicate would execute a pre-planned series of wire transfers. Holloway's corporate accounts, his IP, his patents, everything would be sliced, diced, and routed through a dozen offshore banks in a matter of minutes. By the time Holloway's team figured it out, Holloway Dynamics would be a hollowed-out carcass, and Voigt and Beck would be on a private jet to a non-extradition country. It wasn't a 12-hour liquidity event. It was a 12-minute execution. This meant pulling the fire alarm was useless. Telling Holloway this is a bad deal was useless. He would argue. His lawyers would argue. Voigt would talk his way out of it. She didn't have minutes. She had seconds. She had to stop the physical act of signing. She had to create a disruption so severe that it shattered the meeting, broke the spell, and, most importantly, scared Voigt and Beck. She had to make them think the con was blown, that the police were at the door. She reached the suite. She could hear Voigt's smooth voice. And this final addendum, Garrett, is just the employee retention schedule we discussed. Aria's hand was on the handle. You will be fired, Benoit's voice echoed. You will be arrested. Voigt knows your face. They will find you. She took a deep breath, picturing her brother's smile. Born to fight. She pushed the door open. The entire table looked up, annoyed. Mr. Benoit, who had been hovering near the doorway to ensure his prized guest was satisfied, saw her. His face turned a shade of pale, sickly white. Petrova, I told you, he began, rushing forward. Gentlemen, Voigt said, smiling his predator's smile. He was placing the final signature page in front of Holloway. To the future. Garrett Holloway picked up his pen. It was a heavy, black and gold Mont Blanc. He uncapped it. Mr. Holloway, Aria said. Her voice cut through the room, sharp and clear. Holloway looked up, his eyes black with anger. What is this? I told you we are not to be disturbed. Benoit grabbed Aria's arm. Security! Get her out of here! She's fired! She's hysterical! Sir, Aria said, yanking her arm free from Benoit's grasp, ignoring him completely. She walked directly to the table, planting herself between Holloway and the document. The pen hovered just an inch from the paper. Sir, you have to leave. Now. The words hung in the air, electric and insane. Holloway stared at her. Have you lost your mind? Lars Voigt stood up slowly. The mask was gone. His face was cold, hard, and murderous. Young lady, he snarled. This is a private meeting. Get out! Katrina Beck, the silent one, didn't move. But her hand, under the table, slowly moved to her designer handbag. Sir, please, Aria insisted, her voice trembling but gaining strength. She was looking only at Holloway, trying to will him to believe her. Do not sign that paper. This is not a deal. It's a heist. That's it, Benoit shrieked, lunging for her. You're assaulting a guest. Ask him, Aria yelled, pointing a shaking finger at Voigt. Ask him about Apex Global Ventures. The name hit the room like a bomb. Holloway's hand, the one holding the pen, froze solid. His entire body went rigid. The color drained from his face. Voigt's eyes widened. The mask of civility shattered completely. Ask him, Aria pressed, the words tumbling out of her now. Why he's using Aegis Chat to talk to his bank. Ask him why he's wearing a $3 million fake Patek Philippe. This is the Dubai commodities fraud all over again. They are not Eurostream. They are here to liquidate your company. You sign that, and you are bankrupt in 10 minutes. Please, sir. You have to leave." There was a dead, perfect silence. Holloway slowly, very slowly, placed his pen on the table. He didn't look at Aria. He looked at Lars Voigt. And in that moment, Katrina Beck moved. She wasn't going for a phone. She shot up from her chair, flipping her handbag onto the table. A small, black, semi-automatic pistol was inside. Her hand dived for it. But Aria wasn't just an accountant. Her brother's medical crisis had been caused by a crippling gambling debt. The people who'd come to collect from her, before the illness, had taught her what real desperation looked like. She had spent 2 years taking Krav Maga classes. She didn't hesitate. She didn't scream. As Beck lunged for the gun, Aria grabbed the heavy, ice-filled water pitcher and, with a guttural roar, swung it. She didn't aim for Beck. She aimed for the table in front of her. The pitcher shattered, sending a gallon of ice water and glass shards spraying across the table, soaking the 100-meter contract, Holloway and Lars Voigt. Voigt roared in shock. Beck, momentarily blinded by the splash, fumbled for the gun. And Garrett Holloway, seeing the weapon, finally reacted. "Security!" he bellowed, his voice the sound of a lion. "Gun! In here! Now!" The door burst open. 2 of the hotel's plain-clothed security guards, already on their way thanks to Benoit's panicked call, piled into the room. They saw the scene. Holloway soaked, the table in chaos, and Katrina Beck, who was now raising the small pistol. One guard tackled Beck, a brutal, flying tackle that sent her and the chair crashing into the wall. The gun skittered across the floor. The other guard put his hand on his own weapon and squared off against Lars Voigt. "Don't move! Hands where I can see them!" Voigt, drenched and defeated, slowly raised his hands. His face was a mask of pure, reptilian hatred, and it was all directed at Aria. Aria stood, panting, dripping, still holding the broken handle of the water pitcher. Mr. Benoit was slumped against the wall, his face the color of ash, whispering, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God." Holloway's legal team was hiding under the table. Garrett Holloway himself just stood there, staring. He looked at the guards subduing Beck. He looked at the furious, trapped Voigt. He looked at the ruined, ink-smeared contract. Then he looked at Aria. His face was unreadable. It wasn't anger. It wasn't gratitude. It was calculation. "You," he said, his voice quiet. "Who in the hell are you?" The Sky Suite, moments before a temple of high finance, was now a high-security crime scene. The 2 guards had Voigt and Beck in custody, their hands zip-tied behind their backs. The local police were on their way, sirens wailing in the distance. Mr. Benoit was babbling to one of the guards. "She is fired! Do you understand? Fired! She attacked them! She's unstable!" Holloway, still dripping, held up a hand. "Benoit, shut up!" The manager's mouth snapped closed. Holloway walked slowly around the table, his eyes fixed on Aria. She was still shaking, the adrenaline starting to recede, leaving her cold and terrified. She had just assaulted 2 people, one of them with a deadly weapon, in front of a billionaire CEO. She wasn't just fired. She was going to jail. "Apex Global Ventures," Holloway said, his voice a low rumble. "Aegis chat. The fake Patek." He walked right up to her, close enough that she could smell the expensive, waterlogged wool of his suit. "You are not a waitress." I am," Aria stammered. I used to be an accountant, forensic accounting. I recognized the name, the Dubai case." Holloway stared at her for a long, unbearable 10 seconds. His granite face was carved with a new, complex emotion. It wasn't rage. It was a deep, profound, and terrifying frustration. Then he did the last thing Aria ever expected. He slammed his fist down on the table. The remaining glasses jumped. "Damn it!" he roared, a sound of pure, unadulterated fury. Arya flinched. Benoit yelped. "Sir," the guard holding Voight said, tensing. "Not you," Holloway snapped. He pointed a thick, shaking finger at Arya. You brilliant, catastrophic idiot!" Arya's blood ran cold. "Idiot? Do you have any idea," Holloway seethed, pacing the room, "what you have just done?" I saved you," Arya whispered, her confidence crumbling. "I saved your company." Holloway let out a bark of laughter. It was a harsh, ugly sound. "Saved me? Saved me? Young lady, you just destroyed a 2-year, multi-agency federal investigation." The air left Arya's lungs. "What?" Lars Voight, silent until now, began to laugh. It was a cold, dry rattle. "Oh, Garrett," he chuckled, his accent thickening. "You didn't tell them? This was a party?" Holloway spun on him. "You be quiet." "A sting operation?" Voight continued, his eyes glittering with malicious glee. "You were trying to catch me? After all these years? And this waitress, she just blew it all up. Oh, this is priceless." Holloway ignored him and turned back to Arya. His legal team was slowly crawling out from under the table, their faces white. "My company wasn't over-leveraged, Miss Petrova," Holloway explained, his voice dangerously calm. "That was a narrative we fed to the financial press for 6 months. A lie. I've been hunting these two since they laundered $40 million from one of my subsidiaries in the Dubai scam." He pointed to the ceiling. "This room is wired. The FBI, the SEC, and a team from Interpol have been on a live feed for the last 3 hours. We were waiting for the signature. We were waiting for the wire transfer to initiate. We were capturing the entire chain of command, from them to their technician to their banks in Zurich." Arya's knees felt weak. She leaned on the table for support. "A sting? You were the bait." "I was the bait," Holloway confirmed. "We had them. We had everything. The final irrefutable proof of wire fraud, securities fraud, and racketeering. And you, with your goddamn water pitcher, just introduced an unauthorized civilian element into a controlled federal operation." Voight was still laughing. "He's right, you know. Liebes," he said to Arya. "Whatever evidence they just recorded, it's all contaminated. My lawyers will have it thrown out of court by lunchtime tomorrow. Coercion by a third-party agent. Contaminated crime scene. Procedural misconduct. I might even sue the restaurant for assault. We'll be on a plane by midnight." Arya looked at her hands. She looked at the shattered glass. She looked at the smirking criminal and the furious CEO. She hadn't saved the day. She had ruined it. She had been so sure, so arrogant, so right, and she had been completely, devastatingly wrong. She had seen the play, but she had completely misread the players. "Garrett," Voight said, "I'd love to stay, but I believe I'm owed a phone call, and I will be pressing charges against— What's your name, dear?" Arya couldn't speak. The door opened again, and this time uniformed police officers entered, along with 2 men in dark, perfectly tailored suits. They looked at the scene, at Holloway, at the 2 men in zip ties, and at Arya. "Mr. Holloway," the lead suit said, his voice flat, "we have a problem." "You think?" Holloway spat. The agent looked at Arya. "Who is this?" "This," Holloway said, his voice dripping with contempt, "is Miss Arya Petrova, the waitress who just single-handedly granted Mr. Voight and Miss Beck full immunity." The next 4 hours were the worst of Arya Petrova's life. She was sequestered, not arrested, not yet, but detained for questioning in a way that felt exactly like being arrested. They put her in Mr. Benoit's office, which the police had commandeered as a temporary base. Benoit himself was in the hallway, being treated for shock by paramedics. Arya sat on a hard chair, while detectives and federal agents, the men in suits, fired questions at her. How did you know the name Apex Global Ventures? I used to work in forensic accounting. Who was your contact? Who fed you the intel? No one. I saw it in his notebook. You expect us to believe you identified a multinational criminal syndicate while serving coffee? The disbelief in the room was palpable. They treated her not as a hero, but as a contaminant, a wild variable that had destroyed months of painstaking work. The lead agent, a man named Peters, rubbed his temples. Ms. Petrova, we have to assume you are compromised, that you're a mole for a rival organization, sent in to disrupt the deal and the sting. A mole? Aria was incredulous. I make $14 an hour. I live in a studio apartment. I'm nobody. Nobody just blew up a $100 million sting, Peters retorted. We're running your background. We'll find out who you are. Through the partially open door, she could hear the chaos. Voight and Beck had been taken away, but not before Voight loudly proclaimed his innocence and his intention to sue everyone, from the FBI to the restaurant's laundry service. She heard Holloway's enraged voice. Contaminated? What do you mean, all of it? The audio is clean. You heard him agree to the terms. And Agent Peters's partner, Agent Shaw, it doesn't matter, Mr. Holloway. Their defense will be that your civilian employee, he meant Aria, acted as an agent of coercion, threatened them, and created a hostile environment. They'll say they would have backed out of the illegal deal, but she forced their hand. Any jury will have reasonable doubt. The DA won't even touch this. They're going to walk. We have to let them go. Aria felt sick. She put her head in her hands. She had freed the wolves. After what felt like an eternity, the door opened. Garrett Holloway stood there. The federal agents had cleared out. The restaurant was silent. It was almost 3 a.m. Holloway looked exhausted. The fight was gone, leaving a deep, weary bitterness. They're gone, he said. What? Aria whispered. Voight and Beck. Their lawyer, who is, by the way, a shark from a firm in London, showed up an hour ago. They've been released. Lack of evidence. The DA won't press charges based on your intervention. Mr. Holloway, I'm so sorry. I thought... You thought, he said, cutting her off. He walked in and sat on the edge of Benoit's desk. You're a classic analyst, Miss Petrova. You see the data, you connect the dots, and you act. You never stopped to think that the other dots might be connected too. You never considered that the victim might also be a hunter. He sighed, rubbing his face. You cost me 2 years. You cost the US government millions of dollars, and you let 2 of the worst financial predators on the planet go free. By all rights, I should have you arrested for obstruction. Aria stared at the floor. I understand. But, he continued, you also did something remarkable. Aria looked up. My team, my private team, the best analysts money can buy. They took 6 months to link Voight to Apex Global. They needed high-level informants and a data breach in Panama. You did it in 60 minutes with a fake watch and a dropped notebook. Your instincts are terrifying. He reached into his pocket. When your little display with the water pitcher happened, there was chaos. The guards tackled Miss Beck. Her purse flew open. This fell out. He placed a small, silver object on the desk. It looked like a simple Ledger USB drive. Aria recognized it instantly. A hardware wallet, a cold storage crypto wallet. Exactly, Holloway said. Agent Peters and his team are thorough. They logged it into evidence, but they are also slow. They logged it as 1-1 silver USB drive. They didn't know what it was. They were more interested in the gun. Holloway leaned in. My private security chief however, who came in with me. He knew. He borrowed it from the evidence bag for about 15 minutes before the police forensics team could properly catalogue it. You accessed it? Arya was shocked. We tried. 24-word passkey. Impossible? But, Holloway smiled, a true, cold smile for the first time. My tech guy is better than their tech guy. He didn't need to open it. He just cloned the device's unique identifier. While Voight and Beck were being released, my guy was tracking the wallet's public-facing address on the blockchain. They're not just in wire fraud, Arya breathed, understanding. They're in crypto. They're all in crypto, Holloway said. The Dubai money? They didn't park it in banks. They laundered it through 1,000 different cryptocurrencies. It's been sitting in wallets just like this one. They were going to do the same to me. Convert my assets to crypto and vanish. He stood up. Voight and Beck are free. They think they've won. They are probably on their way to a private airfield right now. But they've made a mistake. They can't access their funds, the real funds, the billions they've already stolen, without this physical key. They'll have a backup, Arya said. Of course, Holloway agreed. But what they don't know is that my team is also at that airfield. And my other team is currently working with the SEC's new crypto division. We've given them the wallet's address. The SEC is flagging it, right now, across every major international exchange. They can't move their money. They can't cash out. They can't buy gas for their jet. Holloway looked at Arya. The sting failed. The criminal case is dead, thanks to you. Voight and Beck will never see the inside of a US prison. Arya's heart sank again. But the financial case, Holloway continued, the asset recovery, just went into overdrive. You didn't just hand us a clue, Miss Petrova. You handed us their entire bank account. We're going to freeze every asset they have. We're going to bankrupt them before they even hit cruising altitude. There's no jail cell fine. But there's no money, no empire, and no escape. It's a different kind of justice. A more corporate kind. 2 days was a lifetime. Arya Petrova sat on the floor of her cramped, box-filled studio apartment. The air was thick with the smell of dust, cardboard, and the stale coffee in a mug by her elbow. It was 3:00 p.m. The grey, indifferent light of the city afternoon filtered through the one window, illuminating the graveyard of her ambitions. She was packing. Or rather, she was supposed to be packing. For the last hour, she'd just been sitting, holding a small framed photo of her and Leo, taken years ago on a boardwalk, both of them squinting and laughing into the sun. She felt hollowed out. The adrenaline had long since evaporated, leaving a sedimentary layer of shame and exhaustion. She had been right, and she had been wrong. She had saved a man, and she had destroyed a case. She was a hero to no one and a disaster to everyone. Mr. Benoit had made her termination brutally official. He'd done it in the chaotic aftermath, his face a mask of trembling, victorious spite. "You are finished, Petrova," he'd hissed, forcing the papers into her hand. "I will personally see to it that you never serve so much as a glass of water in this city again. You are blacklisted. You are nothing." He wasn't wrong. She was fired. She was facing potential civil suits from the restaurant for the damages. She was almost certainly on some new federal watch list for interfering in an active investigation. Her phone hadn't rung once. No thank you from Holloway. No follow-up from the police. Just silence. So, she was packing. The boxes were a monument to her failure. This one held the textbooks from her old career. This one, the few kitchen items she owned. This one, the clothes that had never been good enough. Her plan was a retreat. She would take what little money she had left, get on a bus, and go back to her parents' empty house. She would disappear. She would become the ghost everyone already thought she was. A knock echoed through the tiny apartment. It wasn't a casual knock. It was a sharp, percussive, authoritative sound. Bap, bap, bap. Aria froze. Her heart, which she'd thought too tired to race, hammered against her ribs. Police. It had to be. They were here to arrest her. Obstruction of justice. Assault. Whatever they wanted. She set the photo down, her hands numb. She wiped her dusty palms on her jeans and walked to the door, her entire body braced for the worst. She opened it. The hallway was filled. Garrett Holloway stood in the center, a mountain in a flawless, dark blue pinstripe suit. He looked even larger and more imposing than he had in the Sky Suite. The grim, fluorescent light of the apartment hallway caught the silver in his hair. Flanking him, just behind, were two men in dark, simple suits with earpieces. They were not lawyers. They were bodyguards, and their eyes were scanning the hallway, the stairwell, and Aria herself, all in one unsettling, professional sweep. "Miss Petrova," Holloway said. His voice was a low rumble, too big for the narrow space. "Mr. Holloway." Aria's voice was a dry croak. She gripped the doorknob. Are you here to sue me?" A flicker of something, not quite amusement, but a dry acknowledgement, passed over Holloway's face. He looked past her, into the apartment, at the stacks of cardboard. "I don't sue people I'm about to hire," he said. He walked past her, into the room, not waiting for an invitation. The bodyguards remained at the door, one facing in, one out. Holloway's presence instantly made the apartment feel impossibly small, like a lion had just wandered into a shoebox. He smelled of expensive leather and subtle, clean cologne. He stopped in the center of the room, turning in a slow circle, taking in the cheap furniture, the half-packed life. "You're efficient," he noted, gesturing to the boxes. "Good." Aria was speechless. Her mind was a blank slate, utterly unable to process the words. Hire me, sir? I'm a waitress." She looked down at her own clothes, an old t-shirt and jeans stained with dust. "I'm the person who... I ruined everything. I ruined your case. The feds... Voight. They walked." "Sit down, Miss Petrova," he said. It wasn't a request. Aria sank onto the edge of a box labeled Books. Holloway remained standing, a tower of power and capital. "You are not a waitress," he said, his voice hard. "You are the most ruthlessly effective forensic analyst I have ever had the misfortune to encounter. You are also impulsive, reckless, insubordinate, and a massive, catastrophic liability. In short, you are exactly what I need." He reached into his inner suit pocket, but not for a wallet. He pulled out a thick, heavy business card. "My head of corporate risk and compliance was a man named Dennis Reed. He's been with me for 15 years. He's meticulous, he's thorough, and he's the one who missed the Dubai connection 2 years ago. He was the one who assured me this sting was 99.9% secure. He saw the data, but he missed the picture. I fired him yesterday." He looked at her, his eyes like polished granite. "You saw the picture in under an hour, while serving bread." He tossed the card onto the box next to her. It was heavy, linen stock. Garrett Holloway, CEO Holloway Dynamics on the back. He had written a note in thick black ink. It wasn't a job title, it was a starting salary. Aria picked it up. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely read it. The number was astronomical. It wasn't just 6 figures. It was high 6 figures. It was almost double her old salary from her best year. It was enough to pay off every cent of Leo's medical debt. It was enough to breathe. A wave of dizziness washed over her. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. This had to be a trick. A cruel, complex joke. "I don't understand," she whispered, the words thick in her throat. "I ruined your case. I let them go. You said it yourself. I granted them immunity." Holloway let out a short, sharp sigh. "You're an analyst, Petrova. So let's analyze. You're stuck on the fact that you ruined the FBI's case. You're not looking at what you did for my case." He began to pace, as much as one could in the tiny space. "Scenario A. The FBI's plan. I sign the contract. The wire authorization is transmitted. The feds on the live feed get their go signal. They have a clean, perfect, admissible recording of a wire fraud conspiracy in action. They get their case. They get their headlines. Everyone in Washington is very happy." He stopped and leveled a finger at her. "But what happens to me? In that same second, my assets, my actual liquid capital, my intellectual property, my entire life's work, begin a 12-minute, irreversible journey into the digital void. The feds stop them? Maybe. But do they stop the transfer? Do they get my company back? Or do I spend the next 5 years and $50 million in legal fees fighting in international court while my company bleeds out trying to reclaim what was mine? The feds would get their conviction. I would have lost my company." He let that sink in, the cold, brutal truth of it. "Now," he said, "Scenario B, your plan. The catastrophic, idiotic, brilliant plan. You don't wait for the wire. You don't care about the evidence. You stop the signature. You stop the authorization. The crime, as it pertains to Holloway dynamics, never happens. You didn't wait to see if the patient would survive the perfectly documented disease. You stopped the infection before it could enter the bloodstream." He walked over to her, looking down. "You saved my life's work, Miss Petrova. The feds can be angry all they want. Their objective was a conviction. My objective was survival. You chose my objective. I was just trying to stop them," she said, her voice small. "And you did." He pointed at the card in her hand. "By the way, that crypto wallet you so elegantly retrieved, my team cloned its identifier. While Voight and Beck were celebrating with their lawyer, the SEC's crypto division was using that data to flag their entire network. They're not just frozen, Petrova. They're liquidated." He almost smiled. They made it to the airfield in White Plains, but their cards were declined. Their digital wallets were empty. They tried to pay for $80,000 in jet fuel with a watch, which, as you know, was a fake. They are currently being detained by airport authorities, not for fraud, not for theft, for failing to pay their fuel bill. The feds lost their criminal case, but I won the financial war. We've already begun asset recovery on over $1.2 billion. You didn't just stop a fraud, Miss Petrova. You dismantled an empire with a water pitcher. He had played her. In the office, he had let her believe she was a failure. He had tested her. Arya looked at the boxes around her, the coffins. She looked at the salary on the card, the lifeline. She stood up, her spine straightening, the numbness receding, replaced by a slow, rising heat. The forensic accountant was coming back online. "Wait," she said, her voice clear now, all tremor gone. "What about the Apex? What about Mr. Benoit? He fired me. He said he'd blacklist me." Holloway's face went cold. "Ah, yes, Mr. Benoit. I'd almost forgotten." He walked to the door, brushing an invisible piece of lint from his suit. "As of 9 a.m. this morning, I acquired a controlling interest in the Apex's parent hospitality group, a small, leveraged buyout. It was surprisingly cheap." He turned, and his eyes were as cold as the bottom of the ocean. "Mr. Benoit is no longer with the company. I believe his deep experience in management is being repurposed. He's being transferred to oversee the breakfast buffet at one of our 3-star hotels in Omaha. He paused, then added, "It turns out I really don't like bad service." The last piece of the old world clicked into place. The last ghoster was exorcised. Arya took a deep, shuddering breath. The first real breath she'd taken in 2 days. She wasn't a waitress. She wasn't a victim. She was an analyst. And she was a grenade. Holloway opened the door. The 2 guards snapped to attention. "The desk is on the 50th floor, Miss Petrova. It's larger than this apartment. We have a corporate car downstairs. Be there at 8 a.m. Monday." He was halfway out the door when she spoke. "Mr. Holloway." He stopped and looked back. Arya held up the business card. The tremor was gone. Her hand was rock steady. "I'll be there at 7:45. Garrett Holloway looked at her for a long moment. He saw the person who had served him water, and he saw the person who had saved his company. For the first time, he saw them as one. He gave a single, curt nod. "Good. Don't be late." Then he was gone, and Arya Petrova was left alone in her apartment. She looked at the boxes, and then, with a slow, deliberate movement, she picked up the packing tape and set it back down on the table. She had unpacking to do. In a world of complex deals and hidden dangers, sometimes the most powerful person in the room isn't the one with the money, but the one with the eyes to see the truth. Arya Petrova walked into that restaurant as a waitress, invisible and broken. But she refused to silence the skills she still had. She saw the lie beneath the million-dollar shine and chose to act, risking everything she had left, which was nothing. And in that catastrophic, brilliant moment, she didn't just save a $100 million deal, she uncovered her own value. What did you think of Arya's impossible choice? Have you ever had a gut feeling that something was deeply wrong, even when everyone else was going along with it? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective matters. And if you enjoyed this story of hidden power and last-second justice, please hit that like button, share it with a friend, and subscribe for more real-life drama every week.